You're watching the video sermon podcast of First Baptist Church of Marble Falls, Texas. For almost 130 years, FBCMF has served Marble Falls and the greater Highland Lakes area faithfully through children's programs, youth activities, and adult discipleship. We invite you to join us each and every Sunday morning at 9 and 10:30 a.m. for deep fellowship, rich worship, and a spirit-filled message. For those who find themselves unable to attend on a Sunday morning, we stream those services. Simply visit fbcmf.live during either of our service times to view it. Never miss an archived sermon by subscribing to this podcast on YouTube by visiting youtube.com/FBCMFtube. And to learn more about our church or to listen to an audio-only version of this and other sermons, please visit us online at fbcmf.org.
One of the intimidating things of my life is to try to come up here every Sunday in the midst of a worshiping community and think that through my silly words that I can make a contribution to what the Holy Spirit is doing in this house, in all of your hearts and in all of your minds is always difficult. And so as usual, I'm praying for the Word of God to speak and not me. And this morning, I think that we're going to be in for something that's very special because this song, O Come, Emmanuel, y'all, has such a theology and a history to it that I think you're going to be able to relate to. And for those of you who may not know, we were in a very small but a significant study during this Christmas. I've chosen 4 of the richest Christmas songs that I could find that are rooted deeply in Scripture, but also offer a unique contribution to your and my belief and our worship of Jesus Christ as King and Lord of our life. Each one of these songs offer a little bit more of a handle so that we can begin to grasp the mystery that is Jesus Christ. And I hope that years from now, after all of you have forgotten all of my sermons, that something might be said through this that you might remember just a minuscule, a little bitty piece of it, and it simply might make you happy that you're a Christian. We started out with Joy to the World, and then we went to I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day, and this morning, O Come, Emmanuel. Check this out. O Come, Emmanuel was written by monks at a monastery in the 9th century, that is in the 800s. Y'all, that's during the reign of Charlemagne. 1,200 years ago, it is possibly the oldest song that we have in our entire hymn book. It is an old song. These ancient monks wrote this song with a group of about 6 or 7 other songs in a genre of music literature called the antiphons. Antiphons. Dory and I began talking about it this past week. This unique, peculiar group of Christmas songs sung or chanted rather by monks, kind of in a Gregorian chant kind of way. They chose 7 songs, and they sang one beginning on December 18th, and then another one December 19th, and then December 20th. O Come, Emmanuel was the ultimate. This is the one that they would sing on Christmas Eve. This was the big antiphon, all of them together. These antiphons, when you took the first letter of all of them, it created an acrostic, a 2-word acrostic, which said arrow cross, which means I will come tomorrow. And so you see the creative thing they're doing. They have a song, and all of them are in Latin, and they would all begin with O, and then you have the regular word, like O Sepentia, and then another one is O Adonai, and O Radix Jesse, or the root of Jesse in Latin. And so all of these, when you take the second letter and you add and put them all together, it's arrow cross. Tomorrow I will come. And O Come, Emmanuel was written so that they would begin to be able to build to this wonderful Christmas moment when they celebrated that God came and saved their life. And these ancient monks wrote that. And I think that it's a moving thing, how creative they tried to be. Later on, in the 12th century, in the 1100s, we find the music that you and I sing that is put to it. And the music still captures, even when we heard the praise team do it, it still captures a kind of Gregorian chant kind of thing. It seems to move in this rhythm where they sing and then we respond kind of thing. It has this feel to it, and it's a mournful kind of a feel, which is appropriate. Some of you who want to come in and just sing, all the upbeat, excited songs all the time, that's great, and I love them, but occasionally mourning is right too. Jesus Christ said, "Blessed are those who mourn, and for they will be comforted." And in the Bible, often God's people mourned, and they would cry out to God. And the history, the lyrics of the song, the content is rooted in the mourning of God's people as they're trapped in exile in the Babylonian captivity. And in that place, they are needing God to give them a solution because all of their options had run out. And so they start thinking about, God, how can you come and save us? And they needed Emmanuel, God to leave heaven and to come and to be with them in that exiled place and to give them a solution that they had not dreamt of or thought about. Emmanuel, God, come be with us and fix this situation that we're in. But it's sung and done in kind of a mournful way, which matches not only the Gregorian chants in which it was originally sung and done, but it also matches the content of how the words are really written. And to help us kind of feel that for a second, I found an amazing version of it, and I just want you to listen to 1 minute of the song, and I want you to listen to the words and see if you can detect how it may have been done in a Gregorian chant kind of way by these ancient monks. Here it is. Thanks.
Oh come, Emmanuel, to free your captive that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, O Israel.
You hear that?
To you shall come Emmanuel.
When we sing this song, we are singing a song about Jesus Christ coming into our lives and into our world. And it is a song that is 1,200 years old. And today, over 1 billion Christians all throughout our world still sing it. We sing it because Emmanuel, God with us, is still our belief. And we sing it because even in this day and time, we need Emmanuel to come and to be with us just as much as they did for them. But this isn't even close, not even close to the most remarkable part of it. Pretend like this song is a huge hill that we have around here, and we're going to take a cross section of it, a cross cut, and we're going to look at this vertical section with all of its layers and with all of its sediments that make it up. When you look at a sediment layer of a hill, like here's a picture of one here, and all of the sediments give you kind of a timeline of that hill. And in the same way, this song, if it were that hill, there would be several layers that begin to make it up. And I'm going to list for you all of the layers, starting from the very basic one all the way up to try to give us a sense in how this song comes together. The first layer is in 728 BC. Isaiah said in the passage we read a moment ago in chapter 7:14, Isaiah tells King Ahaz, God, Emmanuel, is going to be with you, because Ahaz has a very difficult position that he's facing. And he needs God to be with him. And that is the basis. He needs Emmanuel to be there. And then based on that, later on in 540 BC, in Jeremiah chapter 23, all of Israel is in exile. And they begin to sing out. They begin to ask the Lord to save them. And they need Emmanuel in that situation too. And then later on, in 4 BC, Jesus Christ comes into our world. And Matthew 1:23 says, this is Emmanuel. This is the real Emmanuel, not the symbolic Emmanuel. Matthew says, this is God with us in Matthew 1:23. And in Luke 1:30, the angel of God declares to Mary that her son will be Emmanuel. And so we see that this is the third layer, the sediment that begins to make it up. But then in AD 60, Matthew begins writing out his gospel about Jesus being Emmanuel. So it happens in 4 BC when the angels come, but Matthew doesn't write the whole thing until the 60s, until AD 60. And then from AD 30, though, all the way through AD 381, God gives Christians the words to describe how this mystery of Jesus being Emmanuel works out. He begins helping them to see how it all comes together. And so the gospel writers begin writing about it. Matthew and Luke and John all fall within that time period. Other writers fall within it. And they are figuring out, what does Emmanuel mean for Jesus to be God with us? And then based on that, then later on, these medieval monks in AD 850, they write, O come, Emmanuel, for Christmas worship, so that the Lord is going to come, and they're worshiping in these antiphons that I talked about a moment ago that leads up to Christmas. They write these out. And then in AD 1100, music is put to O come, Emmanuel, and it's sung for all of these years. And then finally, the top one, 2018, all of us today, Christians, are still singing this song and about Emmanuel being with all of us. Isn't that amazing? Who knew that this song had all of these layers in order for us to sing it and understand it some today? I just want to describe 2 of these layers for you at this time. I want to describe the bottom one and the third one. Isaiah 7, and then I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 1, verse 23. Here's the Isaiah idea where Emmanuel first comes on the scene. It says, therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. A virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son, and he will be called Emmanuel. The name Emmanuel does not occur in any other part of the entire Old Testament, save Isaiah 7 alone. There are other ideas throughout the Old Testament that talk about God being with everybody. In Psalm 46:8, it says, Lord, will you be with us? But the word Emmanuel is a unique and very special word for Isaiah 7. And he holds it that's a special way for all of the people of Israel. And so what is he talking about? 2 Kings 16 describes the situation when this word was born. All of the Israelites had gone into the promised land and conquered it and started to make it their home under Joshua. And once they settled in the land, they had their kings. They had King Saul and then King David and then King Solomon. But here's what happened. After King Solomon, this amazing kingdom where all the 12 tribes of Israel settled, in the year 930 BC, it split. King Solomon's son Rehoboam messed the whole thing up. He lost the kingdom, and all of the tribes in the north formed their own nation, and they called themselves Israel or Ephraim. And in the south, you had Judah, which was based out of Jerusalem, and they were all alone in the south. So you had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, 2 very different kings. The people became very different from one another. And finally, at one point, the southern kingdom of Judah had a king named Ahaz. And the northern kingdom, Ephraim or Israel, began to team up with an adjacent nation called Syria, and they were attacking their old kinfolk, Judah. And they were coming down to attack them, and King Ahaz is panicking. And so here's what it is. I have a little map, and I'm going to show it to you. Here we go. All of this is Judah. All of this is Israel or Ephraim right here. At one time, under King David and Solomon, all of this is one nation. But then in 930, it split right here, and you have the kingdom to the north and the kingdom to the south. And finally, in the year 728, Ephraim or Israel teams up with Aram or Syria right here. And these two guys get together and they say, let's attack Judah and take all of their land and divide it up. And then the king of Syria says, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. The king of Judah hears that these guys have gotten together and he's like, what do I do? We're going to lose everything. And somebody says, well, why don't you go fight them? If you want to go fight somebody, there's always somebody who will encourage you to do that. It's not always good advice. You may get beat up. But there's somebody who's going to say, oh, you can go whip that guy. Why don't you go ahead? Ahaz is saying, no. We can't whip them. We're going to lose this fight. And so he knows that he can't go and fight them. That is an option, but it is a bad, bad option. He figures out, I have another option. The first one isn't any good, but maybe the second one's a little bit better. Ahaz thinks there is another kingdom far to the north, east of Syria, called the Assyrians. And they're more powerful than all of us put together. I'm going to make a deal with the Assyrians. I'm going to pay them a lot of money to come and bail me out of all of this. Yeah, that sounds like a good option. And so he goes and he is going to talk to the king of Assyria, a violent, horrible person named Tiglath-Pileser. And he goes to him and he starts to ask him for help. And y'all, he thinks in his mind, but that's a good option. But that's not a good option either. And Isaiah comes to him and he says, listen, both of your options, fighting against these people and going to get help from the Assyrians, that's not any good either. Both options are bad. And so when he says, man, I'm going to go and ask for help, Isaiah tells him, don't go ask for help. You think Tiglath-Pileser and the Assyrians are going to be good to you? They'll make you pay them money, but not just one time. They'll make you pay it over and over and over. They're going to change the deal. It's like making a deal with Darth Vader. At any moment, they'll say, I've altered the deal. Pray I don't do it again, kind of thing. That's Tiglath-Pileser, and sure enough, that's exactly what he did. And so here's where O Come, Emmanuel happens. King Ahaz only thinks he has two good options. Neither one of them are any good. And so Isaiah comes and he says, King, I have another option for you. God is going to come and be with us. I know it seems like you only have two options, but God is going to be with you, and he has a solution that has never crossed your mind. God is going to use the Assyrian people that you want to go and make a treaty with. God is going to use them, and you don't even have to go make the treaty. Don't go deal with those people. God will use them, and they're going to come and destroy all of this. In fact, that's exactly what happens. Show the next map. In the year 722, just a few years after the Assyrians, which are way over here, this is the Fertile Crescent, here is Jerusalem, this is the Mediterranean Sea, this is modern-day Iraq, modern-day Iran over here. And so the Assyrians are right here at Nineveh. You remember how much Jonah hated Nineveh? These were awful people. The Assyrians come in and they destroy first. There's Aram, there's Syria. They're making the deal with the northern kingdom. And the Assyrians destroy Aram first, and then they get down here, and then they destroy the northern kingdom. And here's Jerusalem, and they don't destroy Jerusalem. That happens. But King Ahaz doesn't believe Isaiah. Isaiah tells him, look, this is going to happen. And so God says, all right, I'll give you a sign that I'm going to protect you. Don't go make a treaty with them. I have a better option. I'll give you a sign if you'll just trust me. And here is the sign. Isaiah points to a young woman, a virgin girl. And he says, in a few years, that girl is going to be old enough to get married. And when she gets married, she's going to have a child. And when that child, before he is old enough to go into the battle, after he has finished and weaned and he gets to eat normal foods, about that time, the Assyrians are going to come in and they're going to destroy these two nations that you're so scared of. You don't have to do anything. God has an option that you haven't thought of, and he's going to do it for you. The sign, Emmanuel, is a pledge from God that he had a solution that King Ahaz didn't know anything about. In church, often, you and I need an Emmanuel-sized solution because our solutions and options are very limited. And here is how it happened for me. This is a great example. Here in our church, about 4 years ago, I went down to youth camp with Ryan Taylor, and we went to South Padre Island, way down south, and there was a little girl in our youth group who invited about 3 or 4 of her friends. One of the girls that she invited was a very precious, a sweet little girl whose family was from Mexico, and she was from Mexico. She went with our youth group, and we went all the way down to South Padre Island, and some of you adults were on this trip. And her family is from Mexico. They were here with Visa cards, and when we got ready to come back, I'm from the valley, and I remember what's on Highway 77 when you start to come back, and there is a Border Patrol check that's there, and I'd driven through it many, many times, and I began to have a moment of panic. Coming out of Port Isabel, I start to think about, because I'd gotten to know this little girl a little bit, and heard her story and knew that they were from Mexico, citizens of Mexico, not citizens of the United States. And so I thought, what are we going to do? We pull over at a little gas station, and I pull her aside, and I said, hey, sweetie, do you have your Visa card, your green card? And she said, no. I didn't know I needed anything like that. And I said, you do? And she goes, why? We're just going to youth camp. I said, I know. And I start to think, what are we going to do? Because in my mind, I know what's going to happen. We're going to pull up in our church van, and the agent is going to come to my window, and I'm going to roll it down, and he's going to ask this question. Sir, is everybody in your van a U.S. citizen? And I was going to be trapped because I only had 2 options. Option 1, I tell the truth. And I say, well, sir, we're coming back from a youth camp. I have this girl, and she's not a U.S. citizen. And he goes, that's all right. Well, let me see. He goes around and he says, young lady, will you get out of the van? Which embarrasses her. And it scares all of the rest of the kids in the van. And he asks her to get out, and everybody else, goes on. And then she's standing out there talking to this agent, and it's an embarrassment. It's hard. And he says, where are your documentation? And then she says, I don't have it. And how do I say that First Baptist Marble Falls isn't smuggling somebody? How do I prove that? I can't. And so I think that this is a real issue. And so he's going to ask her, and when she says, I don't have it, then he tries to call her parents, perhaps. And what if he can't get hold of them? Or he detains her until her parents come all the way down and to be with her. Hours and hours from Marble Falls, and she's just stuck in that situation. And I cared about her. I didn't want her to be in that situation, but that's an option. Tell the truth and get myself into that and have this little girl go through all of that. That's an option. Tell the truth. And then I thought, I have another option. I'll lie. And when he says, is everybody in here U.S. citizens? I'll say, yes. And I'll pray he doesn't see my eyes, right, that betray me through all of that. And then if I lied and I said yes, and then if he looks around at everybody and says, are you, and he asks her, and she says no, then I'm not your pastor today because I just lied to a federal agent. And guess what? I have 2 options, and neither of them are good. and I'm in trouble, lie and try to get through, or tell the truth and embarrass, and the timing and what happens, and I don't know, what am I going to do? I need Emmanuel. I need an Emmanuel-sized solution. I need him to leave the throne room of heaven and come and intervene on Highway 77. What am I going to do? And as we approach, I pray and pray and pray and pray. And we pull up to that place. And in my mind, there are two things that are going to happen. And that federal agent walks to the passenger side, the junior in high school, rolls down the window, and he says, "Are all of you citizens?" And she goes, "I guess." She didn't know how true that was. And then he goes, "Well, then go on through. Go on through." I couldn't believe it. It was unbelievable. Emmanuel is God with us, and God has solutions that have never crossed your mind. Isaiah tells Ahaz, God has a solution, Emmanuel. He's going to be with you, and he has a solution that you have not thought about and that has not even crossed your mind. You are going to be okay. You do not have to fight them, and you do not have to make an alliance with the Assyrians. None of it. When God is with you, new options emerge. I know what you're thinking. If this passage is talking about how God showed up and rescued his people during the Syro-Ephraimite war and rescued them during the captivity, what happened to this Emmanuel talking about Jesus Christ? Well, remember, I said there was several layers to this. Layer 3 is this. In the New Testament, right when time was at hand, God sent his son Jesus Christ into our world. And Matthew knows what has happened. And in chapter 1, verse 23, he uses the word Emmanuel, that God gave a solution to the people of Israel when they thought they had no solutions. He gave them a solution. Matthew says, in the same way, God gives us Emmanuel. He is with us to describe Jesus coming into our world. And all of the New Testament writers, every one of them, understood that Jesus was God incarnate. Matthew is using it right here. Jesus is the real, not the symbolic Emmanuel, but the real Emmanuel to come. That's why Matthew is using it. But here's the best link between Matthew and Isaiah. King Ahaz. I only have two good options, and Emmanuel shows up and gives him a solution that he had never thought of. In the same way, Jesus comes as God with us. And picture our world. Our world has tried everything it knew how to try in order to get salvation. Everything. We've exhausted all of our options. No options left. Salvation wasn't found in the Greek philosophy that everybody was beginning to buy into during the time of Jesus. Greek philosophy wasn't going to do it. The great Roman army giving their Pax Romana, thinking they could bring peace, and yet war broke out all the time. Rome couldn't do it. The Greek culture, the beautiful Hellenization, and that wasn't going to do it either. The Jews tried to find salvation in the law of Moses and all the Pharisees and Sadducees counting up all of their legalism. That wasn't going to do it either. Their options had all run out. They didn't have anything else. You put all of their best efforts together, and the poor were still oppressed. The most vulnerable people in society were still neglected. The violence was still prevalent. There was still sexism and racism and rape and murder and slavery. And it just goes on in common life. Everything is still bad. All of their best efforts, and nothing fixes any of it. And they run out of options. Humanity was out of options. Our world is out of options. We've tried everything through our scientific movements and all of the advances of science. And yet people still die, people still struggle, divorces still happen, children are still abused. The Great Enlightenment didn't do anything when we consider what Hitler did after the Enlightenment. All of our best philosophical, scientific movements, our best education, you put it all together, and issue after issue after issue continues to be prevalent. Inventions galore, but still no salvation. Still no change to somebody's heart and somebody's mind. What's going to pick a marriage up when it's on the floor, on the edge of divorce? What's going to pick up somebody who is addicted to drugs when people have exhausted every other option in their life? Humanity needed an Emmanuel-sized solution. All of our other options were out. And so Matthew says in chapter 1:23 that Jesus Christ came to be our Emmanuel, our amazing solution, and to give us an option that we never thought that we had. Option that never crossed our mind was grace. An option that never crossed our mind was hope. It never crossed our mind that God would become us and then God would die and then raise from the grave. We never figured that. God becoming man? Who would have ever thought of that option? Emmanuel has always been the one to provide a solution when all solutions were dead. A number of years ago, a Dallas elementary school had a great idea that they would invite all of the dads of their students to what they called Breakfast with Dad. It was Dad Day. And so they sent all of the letters out to their parents, and they promoted it, and it was on the calendar, and this is what they were going to do. And then the administrators and the teachers began to think and rethink, and they said, what do we do about all the children whose dads aren't able to make it? What do we do about children who don't have dads? And what do we do about children whose dads are estranged from them? What do you do? And they started counting up. They found that about 50 kids were probably going to be very, very embarrassed because their dads weren't going to be able to make it. What do? And the school district said, well, what option do we have? We've promoted it. Everybody knows. We have people coming. What are our options? Somebody said, well, let's just put it out in the paper and see if there's other men in the community who might come and maybe be a dad to these 50 kids. They put it out in the paper. And everybody comes that next day very nervously, principals, teachers. They come nervously, wondering what's going to happen. And 600 men from the community show up to be a father to the fatherless, to be a dad for all of these kids. And they had the breakfast. Y'all, just like those kids, humanity was orphaned by sin. And it was the unexpected solution by God who showed up to be our Father when we didn't have a father. We didn't have the options. We didn't know what to do. Perhaps some of you need a fresh option this morning, a solution. You need a God with you kind of a solution. And the song, O Come, Emmanuel, is asking for exactly that, a God kind of solution. And I suppose this is the top layer, the 2018 layer for all of us, because you cannot fix, and neither can I, all of the things in your life. We need Emmanuel. And the song, when we sing it, it promises us that Emmanuel is coming, and therefore rejoice. Rejoice, because Emmanuel will be with you. Y'all, the exciting thing, when you see that you have no solutions left and you're at the end of your options, God's solutions are barely beginning, aren't they? Well, oh, come Emmanuel. Lord, we need you to be our Emmanuel. We don't know how to fix everything, and we need a solution that's bigger than all of our options. Will you come and be with us? Pretty neat, isn't it? That's that song.
You've been watching the video sermon podcast of First Baptist Church of Marble Falls, Texas. Never miss an archived sermon or video posted to our YouTube channel by subscribing to it at youtube.com/FBCMF2. For more information about our church and to hear an audio-only version of this sermon, please visit us online at fbcmf.org.